Across the vast stretches of America, in shadowed alleys and forgotten graves, tales of the undead haunt our history. From the chilling mountains of Alaska to the ghostly bayous of Louisiana and beyond. These aren't just legends. These are stories of real vampires, creatures of the night, whose whispers linger in the darkened corners of America. Dare you join us on a journey through America's hidden underworld? Let's find out together. Are vampires real? Across America, in the quiet corners of small towns and hidden alleys of old cities, a dark history lurks. Vampires, creatures thought to be the stuff of nightmares, and yet, whispers of their existence have woven into the fabric of American folklore, from New England's eerie cemeteries to New Orleans' haunted streets. Tales of the undead persist. As chilling as they are perplexing, could there be more to these stories than just legend? Roaming the night in search of blood, often disguised as one of us, hiding in plain sight. But what exactly is a vampire? Some say it is an immortal, a soul suspended between life and death, sustained by the very essence of the living. To others, it is a restless spirit, cursed to walk the earth, feasting on the blood of the innocent. Vampires, we are told, can charm with a glance, slipping unseen into homes, cloaked in mystery and malice. Legends tell us these creatures recoil at the touch of holy symbols, are burned by sunlight, and are bound by sacred earth. Yet, even as folklore weaves rule around them, the vampire remains untamed, as varied and complex as the fears of the people who birthed it. Tonight, we travel across America, from the frozen reaches of Alaska to the humid alleys of New Orleans, to uncover the truth behind the myths. These are not mere stories passed down through centuries, but accounts of real encounters, believed to be more than mere superstition. Our journey begins in the shadows of the West Coast, where chilling tales of the undead emerge. From there, we'll travel eastward across the heartland of America, uncovering secrets from Alaska to New Orleans, Kansas to Connecticut. By night's end, we'll arrive on the East Coast, where the oldest and perhaps darkest vampire legends still linger. Our journey begins in the frozen reaches of Alaska, a land of endless night in the dead of winter, where silence falls thick as snow and darkness seeps into every crevice. It's here, among the remote towns and icy wilderness, that whispers began, a creature who would become known as the Highgate Vampire of Alaska. The year was 1955. Rumors of strange sightings had already begun to ripple through the local community. A pale figure wandering the outskirts of town, tall and gaunt, always seen just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Those who saw him claimed his eyes glowed a faint red in the darkness, reflecting the embers of his sinister purpose. Livestock began to disappear, and soon after their lifeless bodies were discovered in the snowy fields, strangely drained as if someone had taken their blood and left them as empty husks. As the tales grew, so did the fear. One night, an elder of the town claimed to have seen the figure up close. He was returning from a late-night hunt when he glimpsed a shadow moving quickly across the snow. Curious, yet cautious, he followed the figure, watching it as it darted in and out of view. Finally, the elder's eyes met those of the creature. Cold, piercing eyes set in a face pale as death itself. In an instant, the figure was gone, disappearing into the thick Alaskan forests. But the elder was left with a deep chill in his bones. Days later, the village awoke to a terrible discovery. A young woman had gone missing. Her family described her as a spirited and strong, but now her room lay empty, her bed untouched, as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Search parties combed the surrounding woods, and after 3 days they found her, lying motionless in the snow, her skin pale and her body drained. There was no sign of struggle, no trace of what had taken her life, only 2 faint puncture marks on her neck. The people grew desperate, seeking answers and protection from the menace that stalks their night. A local priest, hearing the villagers' plight, declared the creature a vampire, a being cursed to roam the night and feed on the blood of the living. He instructed the townspeople to take drastic measures. Crosses were hung above every door, silver objects were carried for protection, and garlic was strewn around homes to ward off the creature. But still, shadows loomed and fear festered. In the weeks that followed, sightings of the vampire decreased, yet a sense of dread clung to the village like frost on bare skin. Over time, the memory of the vampire faded, becoming little more than an unsettling tale told around fires on the coldest of nights. But some believe the creature simply moved on, waiting in the shadows for another village, another victim. And so, the Highgate vampire of Alaska remains a mystery, a whisper lost in the snow, a legend that clings to the cold Alaskan air, or perhaps a dark truth buried just beneath the ice. In the heart of San Francisco, a city known for its vibrance and history, lies a tale shrouded in fog and mystery. In the late 1800s, San Francisco was a city of opportunity, a bustling port where people from every corner of the world arrived, lured by dreams of gold and prosperity. But with the wealth came something dark, something hungry. One by one, rumors began to emerge from Chinatown, a string of mysterious deaths. Men were found slumped in alleyways, faces pale with no apparent wounds. Their blood seemed drained, and an aura of death hung to their bodies. The locals began to whisper of a devil in their midst, a figure who moved silently through the fog and left nothing but corpses in his wake. The figure would come to be known as the Vampire of San Francisco. The story of the vampire spread, each version more chilling than the last. Some said he was a man from Europe, pale-skinned and an aristocrat, who could charm his way into any home. He would smile, his teeth white as bone, and within moments his victim would feel a faintness, a sudden heaviness, as if life itself were slipping away. Others claimed he was something inhuman, a shadow without a face, who needed no invitation to enter and left nothing but death behind him. One night, a policeman investigating the strange occurrences caught a glimpse of a man in dark clothing standing near a lamppost. The figure's eyes gleamed, almost as if they were red, catching him with a cold intensity. The officer felt an unnatural chill run through him, freezing him in his tracks as he watched the figure melt back into the fog. It was a brief encounter, but enough to set his heart racing and confirm his suspicions. Something sinister was at play in San Francisco. With fear mounting, the police launched an investigation, scouring the alleyways and interviewing witnesses. But with every lead, the story grew stranger. Those who survived encounters with the vampire could recall nothing of his face, only a pair of piercing eyes, a whisper in the night, and a darkness that followed them home, haunting their dreams. Some were marked with faint punctures on their necks, no deeper than a pinprick, but enough to send chills through their veins. Then, just as mysteriously as he had appeared, the vampire of San Francisco vanished. The strange death stopped, and the foggy streets fell silent once more. Some believed he had moved on, while others claimed he was hiding, waiting, choosing his next victims carefully. But the people of San Francisco did not forget. His legend persisted, whispered in hushed tones by those who dared to remember. So, if you find yourself alone in the darkened streets of San Francisco with the fog curling at your feet, beware. For perhaps somewhere out there in the mist, the vampire of San Francisco still watches, waiting for his next chance to strike. Our journey takes us now to the arid deserts of Nevada, a land known for its endless stretches of sand and sky, a place where secrets are buried as deep as the mines that dot its rugged landscape. It was here, in the heart of Nevada, that a story emerged of a creature who fed not just on the bodies, but the very souls of its victims. In the late 1800s, Nevada was alive with the feverish excitement of silver mining. Prospectors flocked to its small, hastily built towns, hoping to strike it rich. One such town, known as Gold Creek, was the site of an unusual legend. The tale of a man who arrived mysteriously and who, it was said, brought nothing but death and darkness. The stranger was tall, his skin pale, despite the desert sun, his presence unnerving to all who crossed his path. The townsfolk avoided his gaze, for it was rumored his eyes were cold as ice, with a glint of something unholy. Then one by one, miners and townsfolk began to fall ill with a strange sickness. It started as an unbearable fatigue, followed by a pallor that made their faces look like ghostly masks. No doctor could diagnose the cause, and within days, these afflicted would be found dead in their beds, their bodies drained of color and vitality. The only common link among them was that each had been seen just once in the company of the stranger. As the deaths mounted, fear and superstition grew. The stranger, the townsfolk whispered, was a vampire, a creature who fed on the life force of others, yet no one dared to confront him, for those who even spoke of him claimed they could feel his eyes upon them, his presence lurking like a shadow they could never escape. Those who did muster the courage to speak out claimed that they heard him prowling at night, his footsteps echoing down the silent streets, stopping only when he found his next victim. At last, a group of miners, desperate and determined, gathered to confront the stranger and rid their town of his curse. One night, they followed him as he ventured out into the desert under the cover of darkness. They tracked his path for miles until he reached the entrance of an old, abandoned mine. There, he disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by the earth itself. The men stood silent, waiting and watching. When dawn broke, they entered the mine, but found no trace of him. Only the chilling sound of wind whistling through the abandoned tunnels. Some say he escaped into the depths, that he's still down there, waiting in the shadows, entombed within Nevada's desert sands. Others claimed he vanished into the night, leaving a trail of despair and death in its wake. Perhaps this is where the bat myth comes from. Today, the tale of the vampire of Nevada lives on in ghost towns scattered across a barren landscape, a reminder that some horrors are not easily explained or confined. They remain, haunting the places they once walked, waiting, perhaps for the next traveler to cross their path. Our journey through the darkness leads us now to Collinsville, Illinois, a quiet town where history seems to breathe through its buildings and shadows grow long at dusk. Among these shadows lies a chilling tale, the story of a vampire who, it is said, still haunts the town's edge, waiting for the night. The tale begins in the early 1900s when a series of mysterious deaths gripped the town. Each death was marked by the same sinister signs: Victims pale as moonlight, their skin cold, bodies drained of life as though their very souls had been taken. No wounds, no illness, only a lifeless pallor and eyes fixed in silent terror. Rumors swept through the town, whispers of a creature from beyond the grave, a vampire who prowled the quiet streets by night, hungry for blood. Legend has it that this vampire resided in a secluded cemetery just outside of town, where an unusual gravestone still stands to this day, a stone engraved with cryptic markings that some say are meant to keep the creature contained. The vampire, known as the Collinsville Fiend, was believed to rest here, rising only at nightfall to seek his next victim. Townspeople spoke of glimpsing a figure moving among the graves, slipping between the tombstones, his eyes aglow in the moonlight. The vampire's influence spread quickly, casting a pall over Collinsville. Frightened locals tried to protect themselves by placing iron crosses and amulets on their doors, believing they would ward off the creature. Yet still, the deaths continued. It was said that no amount of protection could keep the fiend at bay once he set his sights on you. In time, a group of men from the town, farmers, shopkeepers, husbands, gathered in secret to put an end to the terror. They made their way to the cemetery, carrying stakes, holy water, and silver to cleanse their town of the fiendish presence. But as they searched through the darkened graves, no trace of the vampire could be found. Some say he sensed their approach and disappeared into the night. Others believe he is bound to Collinsville, still lurking in the shadows, cursed to remain for eternity. To this day, the cemetery remains, a place of unsettling quiet and shadows that seem to move just beyond the corner of one's eye. Visitors claim to feel a chill, an icy breath on their skin, as though someone or something is watching. So if you find yourself in Collinsville after dark, remember this. The fiend is said to still walk these grounds, and he does not take lightly to trespassers. I know the question that you're wondering. Vampires. Doesn't New Orleans have vampires? Well, that takes us to our next story. Let's go back to New Orleans. Deep in New Orleans, there is a tale as dark as the midnight sky. A tale of a man, or perhaps something more, whose charm and mystery captivated the city by day and whose secrets brought terror by night. This is the story of Jacques St. Germaine, the vampire of New Orleans. It was the early 1900s when Jacques St. Germaine arrived in New Orleans, a man of striking appearance and enigmatic charm. He was said to be of European nobility, a descendant of the infamous Comte de Saint Germain, the mysterious figure who had bewitched the courts of Europe with his knowledge, wit, and seeming immortality. While the Comte had been a man of legend, Jacques was very much real, a man whose presence cast a long and sinister shadow over the city. Saint Germain quickly became known for his extravagant parties, where the wine flowed freely and the conversation was as rich as the food. He was a master storyteller, regaling his guests with tales of ancient times, of kings and queens long dead, as if he had known them personally, and perhaps in some way he had. But there was something about Jacques St. Germain that set him apart. Something in his eyes, his voice, his very presence, that hinted at a truth too terrible to comprehend. There were whispers that St. Germain never ate or drank in public, that his wine glass was always full yet never emptied. And then there were the women who attended his parties, entranced by his allure, only to vanish into the night, never to be seen again. The city began to murmur with rumors, Tales of a man who was not what he seemed, of a creature who lived off the life force of others. The story reached its chilling climax one fateful night when a young woman, bloodied and terrified, burst from St. Germaine's home, claiming she had barely escaped with her life. She spoke of being attacked, of fangs that tore into her flesh, of eyes that glowed with a hunger that was not human. The authorities were called, but when they arrived, St. Germaine was gone, vanished, as if he had never existed. Inside the house, they found no trace of the man, but they did find something far more disturbing. Bottles of wine, untouched and perfectly preserved, filled not with wine, but with blood. The evidence was undeniable. Jacques St. Germaine was no mere man. He was a creature of the night, a vampire who had walked among them, preying on the unsuspecting, feeding off of their life force to sustain his own cursed existence. To this day, the legend of Jacques St. Germaine endures, a tale that has become part of the very fabric of New Orleans. Some say he still walks among us, hidden in plain sight, his face unchanged by the passage of time, his hunger as insatiable as ever. So when you wander the streets of the French Quarter at night, take care to watch for the shadows, and beware of the man whose smile is just a little too sharp, whose eyes just a little too bright. For in this city, where the dead refuse to rest, you may just find yourself face to face with the vampire of New Orleans. Amid the narrow, winding streets of New Orleans stands a building as old as the city herself, a place of sanctuary, of silence. The Ursuline Convent, founded in 1727, has long been a beacon of faith and hope, but beneath its sacred walls lies a tale so dark it has become one of the most enduring legends of this haunted city. The cities of the Ursuline arrived from France to care for the sick and educate the young, bringing with them a strict code of discipline and devotion. But with them came something else, something mysterious, something sinister. It is said that within the convent's upper floors, beyond the reach of prying eyes, the sisters harbored a dark secret. In the dead of night, strange sounds were heard emanating from the convent, whispers, footsteps, and the faint cries of souls in torment. The sisters, bound by their vows of silence, spoke not a word of what transpired within these hallowed halls, but the townsfolk could not ignore the signs, the feelings of dread that hung over the convent like a pall, the shadows that seemed to move on their own. According to the legend, the sisters were not alone in their devotions. They were said to be guarding something, or someone, within the upper floors of the convent. They say it was a group of young women sent from France to escape persecution, who carried with them a curse. Others whisper of vampiric entities, confined to the convent by sacred rites, held at bay only by the sisters' unwavering faith. To this day, the upper floors of the Ursuline Convent remain sealed, untouched by time, forbidden to all but the most devout, and yet the legend persists. Some claim to have seen spectral figures in the convent's windows, their faces pale as the moonlight, their eyes filled with an eternal sorrow. Others report sounds of chanting, long after the last of the sisters have retired for the night. What truths lie behind the walls of the Ursuline Convent, we may never know, but in a city where the past is never truly past, where the line between the living and the dead is as thin as a whisper, one thing is certain: New Orleans is a place where secrets do not stay buried for long. As the sun rises over the Crescent City, we leave the Ursuline Convent to its secrets, but not without a word of caution. Should you find yourself near these ancient walls after dark, beware the shadows, for they may hold more than just echoes of the past. New Orleans, a city steeped in magic, mystery, and the eerie echoes of the past. But among its tales of voodoo and restless spirits, there is a bloodier story, one that has lingered for over a century. It is the tale of the Carter brothers. Two men whose thirst, it is said, was not for wine or whiskey, but for blood. In the 1930s, locals in the French Quarter began noticing that residents were disappearing without a trace. Friends, family members, all seemed to vanish into the night, leaving only whispers and unanswered questions. The missing individuals had one thing in common. They were last seen in the company of John and Wayne Carter, two mysterious brothers who kept to themselves in a small apartment on Royal Street. The secret of the Carter brothers was discovered by accident when a young girl, weak and disoriented, stumbled into the street from their apartment, her wrists covered in bruises and tiny cuts. She was barely alive, but managed to tell her rescuers a chilling tale that the Carters had kept her chained in their home, feeding on her blood day after day. Authorities, horrified, descended on the apartment, where they found others like her, shackled, drained, and pale as death. The brothers were quickly arrested, but the discovery did little to calm the city's fears. Even in captivity, the Carters seemed otherworldly, their eyes glazed over with a cold, calculating hunger. Some said their gazes held an unnatural darkness, as they could see straight through to the soul. They showed no remorse, no emotion, only the hollow eyes of creatures who had lived far too long. Though the brothers were convicted and put to death for their crimes, the tale did not end there. When authorities returned to their graves some years later, they discovered something terrifying. The bodies were gone. The coffins empty, as if the Carter brothers had never been laid to rest at all. Locals came to believe that they had returned to the streets of New Orleans, prowling for victims and feeding in secret. Even now, some claim to see figures who resemble the Carter brothers, haunting the French Quarter, watching from shadowed doorsteps or slipping into alleyways just before dawn. Ah, Savannah, a city as beautiful as it is haunted, where tales of spirits and shadows linger like the moss in the trees. But beneath its genteel southern charm lies a dark tale, a story of a vampire whose thirst knew no boundaries and whose legend has haunted this city for generations. Tonight, we tell the story of the vampire of Savannah. The origin of Savannah's vampire are shrouded in mystery, hidden beneath layers of rumor and fear, innuendo. Some say he was a sailor who arrived in the port in the 1800s. Others claim he was a mysterious stranger from far across the sea. But all agree on one thing: he was no ordinary man. His presence left an eerie chill wherever he went. His gaze piercing and cold, locals felt a strange sense of dread around him, an instinct to look away. Soon after his arrival, strange occurrences began to plague the city. People were found in their homes, drained of life, their bodies pale and lifeless, as though the very essence had been pulled from them. Whispers of a vampire began to spread, and locals spoke of glimpsing a shadow figure in the moonlight, gliding silently through the squares and gardens. The city was gripped with fear, and no one dared walk alone after dark. Despite their fear, no one knew where he might hide, until a young woman claimed to have seen him slipping into one of Savannah's oldest cemeteries, a place as beautiful as it is macabre. She described him as a tall figure dressed in black, his skin ghostly pale under the moonlight, vanishing into the shadows of the graves. Determined to rid their city of the dark presence, a group of brave souls gathered one night, armed with holy water, iron stakes, and a desperate hope. They combed the cemetery, searching every crypt, every grave, until they reached a hidden tomb at the edge of the grounds. They pried it open, and inside they found an empty coffin, the final proof of their fears. He was real. But just as they prepared to seal the tomb, a cold wind swept through the cemetery, and from the shadows they felt his eyes upon them. The figure moved swiftly, a dark blur against the night, and within moments he had disappeared, leaving nothing but silence and a lingering dread. No one ever found the vampire's resting place, and some say he still roams the city to this day, hiding in plain sight among Savannah's haunted streets. Visitors and locals alike tell stories of a man in dark clothing, seen only in fleeting glimpses, by the river, in the squares, or standing silently beneath the oaks. Is he a specter, a memory, or does he yet walk the streets, forever hungry, drawn to Savannah's endless night? In the heart of the Sunshine State lies a place far removed from the beaches and laughter, a place hidden from the sun itself. Highgate Cemetery, an unlikely name for a forgotten cemetery nestled within Florida's dense woodlands. It holds secrets darker than its tangled vines and twisted trees. And among these secrets is the tale of a vampire, or some say vampires, who haunt its grounds, casting a shadow over those who dare to enter. The legend began decades ago, in the early 1900s, when the cemetery was first established. Though it started as a resting place for local townsfolk, strange occurrences began soon after the first graves were dug. Visitors reported seeing dark figures gliding between tombstones, shadowy shapes that seemed to disappear the moment you focused on them. It was only a whisper at first, but whispers have a way of becoming rumors, and rumors have a way of becoming fears. As the years passed, the stories grew more sinister. Locals began to find animals, small creatures, birds, even livestock, lying dead near the cemetery grounds, drained of blood, their bodies pale and eerily lifeless. It wasn't long before people suspected something unnatural was at work, and it was in these murmurings that the legend of the Highgate Cemetery vampires was born. Some claim that there was a family who lived nearby, reclusive, never seen in daylight, and whose presence stirred only whispers. The family was believed to practice dark rituals, and it was said they were in league with forces far older and far darker than anything Florida had seen. According to the tale, they were not merely practitioners of the dark arts. They had been cursed, bound to walk the earth forever, sustained only by the blood of the living. Highgate Cemetery began a place to avoid, especially after dark. Those who dared to trespass on its grounds claimed to feel eyes watching them, a prickling sense of dread that crawled over their skin. Some spoke of hearing faint whispers, voices urging them to leave while they still could. And then there were the stories of those who went in and never returned. In the 1970s, a group of young paranormal investigators dared to spend a night in Highgate Cemetery, armed with little more than flashlights and tape recorders. According to the lone survivor of that night, they encountered a figure, tall, pale, and cloaked in shadow, moving without sound. His eyes, the man claimed, were unlike anything he'd ever seen, cold, hollow, and yet hungry. The other investigators were found the next morning at the edge of the woods, their bodies as pale as the graves around them, drained of life, only with faint puncture marks on their necks as a sign of what had taken place. The legend of the Highgate Cemetery vampires continues to haunt Florida's dark folklore. Even now, locals say that on certain moonlit nights you can still catch glimpses of them, shadowy figures gliding through the trees, vanishing before your eyes, and if you listen closely enough, some claim you can hear faint whispers calling you, urging you to come closer, to join them in the endless night. Perhaps somewhere in these shadows the vampires of Highgate Cemetery still walk, lingering in this world drawn to the living, forever hungry, forever waiting for you. In the quiet, unassuming town of Jewett City, Connecticut, nestled deep within the heart of Griswold, lies a story so dark and sinister it has haunted the town for over a century. The year was 1854, and a strange, inexplicable disease had gripped the Barber family. One by one, they succumbed to a mysterious illness, their vitality drained, their bodies emaciated. It was not long before whispers of the supernatural began to circulate. The townspeople, gripped by fear and superstition, began to believe that the cause of this plague was far more sinister than any mere disease. Driven by desperation, the townspeople turned to an ancient and macabre remedy, the exhumation and examination of the dead. They believed that the deceased members of the Barber family were not resting peacefully in their graves, but instead had become vampires, rising from their tombs to feed upon the living. On a cold, dreary day, the graves of the Barber family were unearthed. What they discovered sent shivers down their spines and cemented the fears. The bodies, despite having been buried for years, showed little to no sign of decomposition. Even more disturbing, the nails and hair seems to have continued to grow. The traces of what appeared to be fresh blood were found in the hearts of the corpses. Believing that they had found the source of the curse, the villagers performed a gruesome ritual to banish the vampires. They burned the hearts of the deceased, hoping to break the vampiric curse that had befallen the town. But the story of the Jewett City vampires did not end there. To this day, the town is steeped in eerie lore and tales of restless spirits. Visitors claim to feel a chilling presence in the cemetery, the air heavy with an unearthly dread. The Barber family graves stand as silent sentinels, a stark reminder of the town's dark past and the terrifying power of fear and superstition. Each year, as the nights grow longer and shadows creep across the land, the legend of the Jewett City vampires is whispered once more, sending shivers down the spines of those who dare to listen. For in Jewett City, the past never truly dies. It merely slumbers, waiting for the unwary to disturb its eternal rest. In the shadows of 19th century New York, an ominous fear took root. Amidst the bustling trees and quiet rural towns, whispers of the undead began to spread, igniting a panic that would leave the region forever haunted by tales of terror. The year was 1817, and the small village of South Woodcock was gripped by a mysterious and deadly illness. One by one, residents fell prey to a wasting disease, their bodies withering, their vitality drained as if by some unforeseen force. As the death toll rose, so did the whispers of vampires lurking in the shadows, preying upon the living. The fear of the undead was not new to the villagers. It was deeply rooted in the old world superstitions brought over by early settlers. Desperate to end the curse, the villagers turned to ancient rituals, exhuming the bodies of the recently deceased to search for signs of vampirism. In the cold light of dawn, the graves were opened, revealing the bodies of the dead. To their horror, some corpses appeared remarkably preserved, with fresh blood pooling in their mouths and hearts. These signs, they believed, confirmed their darkest fear. The dead were rising to feed on the living. Driven by desperation and dread, the villagers performed grim rituals to banish the vampires. They burned the hearts of the suspected undead, scattering the ashes in an attempt to break the curse that had befallen them. But the vampire panic was not confined to South Woodstock. It spread like wildfire through the Hudson Valley and beyond. Fueled by fear and hysteria, tales of the undead echoed through the darkened corridors of New York, each story more terrifying than the next. Even as the years passed and science began to shed light on the true cause of this mysterious illness, the legend of the New York vampires endured. Today, the shadow of those days still lingers, for in the heart of New York, the fear of the undead remains, forever etched in the annals of terror. In the heart of Rhode Island lies a tale so macabre and spine-chilling that it has haunted the small town of Exeter for over a century. This is the story of Mercy Brown, the last known vampire of New England. The year was 1892, and the Brown family had been ravaged by a mysterious illness. Tuberculosis, known then as consumption, had claimed the lives of George Brown's wife and their daughters, Mary Olive and Mercy Lena Brown. One by one, they wasted away, their strength sapped by an unseen force. As Mercy lay on her deathbed, the townsfolk whispered of an ancient curse. They believed that the dead were rising from their graves, feeding on the living, and spreading the dreaded disease. When Mercy finally succumbed to the illness, fear and superstition took hold of the desperate community. Driven by a primal need to save his remaining family, George Brown allowed the villagers to exhume the bodies of his loved ones. Under the cold, gray sky, they gathered at the cemetery, their faces etched with dread. The graves were opened, revealing the decayed remains of Mary Eliza and Mary Olive. But when they reached Mercy's grave, a chilling discovery awaited them. Though she had been dead for months, Mercy's body appeared eerily well preserved. Her cheeks were flushed with color, and blood was found in her heart. To the horrified villagers, this was undeniable proof that she was a vampire, rising from her tomb to prey upon the living. In a gruesome attempt to break the curse, they removed Mercy's heart and liver, burned them to ashes, and mixed the ashes with water. This concoction was given to her ailing brother, Edwin, as a desperate remedy. Despite their efforts, Edwin soon succumbed to the illness, but the legend of Mercy Brown was forever etched into the town's history. Today, Mercy Brown's grave stands as a testament to the time when fear and superstition ruled the hearts of men. Visitors of the Chestnut Hill Cemetery claim to feel an unearthly chill, as if Mercy herself still lingers trapped between life and death. As night falls, the shadows lengthen, and the whispers of the past grow louder. The tale of Mercy Brown serves as the haunting reminder of a darkness that once gripped the human soul, and the desperate lengths to which people will go when faced with the unknown. For the quiet town of Exeter, the specter of Mercy Brown endures, her story forever woven into the fabric of New England's haunted history. The stories linger of lives drained, of creatures that feed on the life force of others. Some claim they are not real, others dismiss them as fantasy, yet the question remains: are vampires simply the products of imagination, or are they waiting, watching, hiding in the darkness of the night?